Hello, welcome to World History to 1500. And in this presentation, we're going to be looking at the history of India, Western Asia, Africa, and the Americas. And we're going to begin with India. India has really influenced much of Asia, especially, and the world with its religions. And one of the most ancient religions in the world, and one of the predominant religions of India today, is Hinduism. Today there are just over 1 billion people who practice Hinduism. And Hinduism, like I said, is a very ancient religion. There's evidence to suggest that Hinduism might have existed in the Indus Valley civilization. This was one of not only the most ancient civilization of India, but the one of the most ancient civilizations in world history. It was located in what is today Pakistan and northern India along the Indus River Valley. And they developed a system of writing. Unfortunately, it has not been deciphered, but from the images and the artwork that has been produced by the civilization, it is clear that they may or probably did worship some form of the Hindu gods that continue to be venerated to this day. So Hinduism is a religion that worships many different gods. It's called polytheism. But there are certain deities that are especially revered by Hindus. One such deity is the god Shiva. You can see a picture of him on the far right image. Shiva was or is, in the Hindu beliefs, the god of both life and death. Another prominent deity that is venerated by Hindus today is the god Vishnu. You can see a portrait of him right next to the left of Shiva. And Vishnu was called the preserver. So Shiva, as the god of death, was known as the destroyer, and Vishnu, who was a god of healing and safety and salvation, was known as the preserver. Now, another prominent feature in the Hindu religion is its caste system. Now, for Hindus, you are born into a certain caste, and as a member of caste, you have certain privileges and certain responsibilities that others don't have. So each caste is distinct, and it's a hierarchical system. So some castes have higher status than others. So, for example, the highest caste in Hinduism is the Brahmins. And Brahmins, for example, are considered to be a priestly class. They oversee important religious rituals. I have a picture on the bottom. It's important to remember that Hinduism is a living religion, and so we have a picture of some Brahmins celebrating one of their rituals together. Now, many historians think that this caste system may have developed perhaps in Iron Age India, maybe around 800 BCE, but we're not really sure. And maybe it originally reflected the social class structure. For example, the priests and warriors would be the elites, followed by craftsmen and merchants and farmers. Now in India, the lowest caste are known as the untouchables, and they're called untouchables because being the lowest caste, for a Hindu to have even contact with such a person brings you subject to pollution. And so if you touch an untouchable, a Hindu will have to go and take a ritual bath to bathe himself, because it is believed that an untouchable will bring them pollution. And in the Hindu faith, untouchables can only do certain jobs that nobody else would want, like clean sewers or skin animals. Now the teachings of the ancient Hindus and current Hindus are preserved in a system of writing called Sanskrit that was probably developed after 500 BC, and it was probably adapted from the Phoenician alphabet from Western Asia. And the Sanskrit preserves the most ancient texts of Hinduism, its sacred scriptures, and the most ancient texts are the Vedas, and these are a collection of hymns about the various gods that the Hindus worship. They're songs of praise, But many historians think these Vedas, even though they were probably written at some point after 500 BC, they may have been written down then, but it's believed that they were preserved orally from generation to generation, and they may go back as early as 1500 BCE. Now, another very important religion to come out of India is Buddhism. And Buddhism was founded by a person in the same way that when Christians think of their founder, they think of Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ. For Buddhists, the founder is a man by the name of Siddhartha Gautama, who lived around 500 BC, and he lived in what is today northern India, near the border with the modern nation of Nepal, and he became known as the Buddha, which is a title, in the same way that Messiah is the title of Jesus, Jesus the Christ. Siddhartha Gautama is the Buddha, which means the enlightened one. The story that is told about Siddhartha Gautama was that he was born a wealthy prince, and he gave all that up to devote his life to meditation and learning and teaching, and was the enlightened one. Now, Siddhartha Gautama, he lived at a time of great intellectual ferment, intellectual activity, and it so happened that there were many Hindu philosophers that were contemporaries of Siddhartha Gautama. So a lot of the teachings of the Hindu faith are very similar to the teachings of Buddha. There are some differences, of course, but there is a great deal of overlap. For example, Hindus and Buddhists believe in reincarnation. They believe that the soul, when somebody dies, the soul is reborn in a new body, and that and this always happens. So once you die, you're reincarnated in a new body. And when you're reincarnated into a new life, whether you're reincarnated into a better or worse situation is based on the concept of karma. So if karma can sometimes be translated as cosmic justice, and there's good karma and there's bad karma. If you're lived a good life and you're a good person, that's good karma. If you've done bad things, that's bad karma. And the way you're reincarnated will depend upon your good karma or your bad karma. So you could be reincarnated to a worse life, or you could be reincarnated into a better life based on one's karma. Now, a very important concept in both among Hindus and Buddhists is this idea of dharma, which can mean truth or goodness, or basically living a good, noble, truthful, and honorable life. For Buddhists, the Dharma are the collected teachings of Buddha, and Buddha had certain principles that he taught. For example, loving one's neighbor was very important, having love and compassion for others. And another principle, another part of Dharma for Buddhists was a life of moderation, avoiding excess in all things, living a moderate life. Now, a unique idea among Buddhists is that the idea of nirvana. Buddhists believe that if you are someone who has lived a particularly good life, someone who has lived in harmony with others, then you can escape reincarnation, you can escape the cycle of reincarnation and be united with nirvana. Nirvana is the reality, the true reality of the entire universe. And when you are united with nirvana, you lose your individuality and you become at one with the all. Nirvana literally means nothingness, because when you achieve nirvana, you become no particular thing. You're no thing, and you're at one with the reality, the all, the reality behind the world that we look and see and observe. Now Buddhism, around 2,000 years ago or so, Buddhism split into two versions, Mahayana Buddhism and Hinayana Buddhism. Now, Mahayana Buddhism was developed around 2,000 years ago, about 100 AD or 100 CE or so. And in Mahayana Buddhism, it is believed that there are certain wonderful people, could be a man, could be a woman, wonderful people who live beautiful lives, who can achieve nirvana, but decide instead of melding into the nirvana that they are going to remain spirits and devote their time to helping others achieve a better life. And these saintly people are known as bodhisattvas. And for Mahayana Buddhists, they will worship and revere a bodhisattva, and they believe that that bodhisattva will help them become a better person and help them throughout their lives. Hinayana Buddhism is believed to be the Buddhism that is closer to the Buddhism of Siddhartha Gautama. So there are no bodhisattvas in Hinayana Buddhism. Now, today, Mahayana Buddhism is primarily found in Northern Asia, in Korea, Japan, whereas Hinayana Buddhism is still largely practiced in much of Southeast Asia. Now, Hindu religions, as I mentioned already, they spread beyond the borders of what is today India. You can see from the map at the bottom that in the case of Buddhism, it spread north into Central Asia and then across China and into Korea and Japan. It also spread into Southeast Asia and into Indonesia. Just to give you an example of the extent of both Hinduism and Buddhism, around 1200, you can see the map on your right, around 1200, it's called the Khmer Empire. It was a great, vast empire located in much of what is today the country of Cambodia. It flourished around 1200 CE, and the people in this empire believed that their rulers were incarnations of the god Shiva. And one of the biggest temples ever built in world history is called Angkor Wat. You can see the ruins of it below. One of the largest temples ever built, and it was a temple devoted to the god Shiva. So here we have, outside of India, in Southeast Asia, a whole empire that worships particularly a Hindu deity. Just to the west of the Khmer Empire was the pagan empire. If you look on the map, it's you can see it's the pink colored area west of the orange area where is the Angkor Empire. Now the pagan empire was located in what is today Myanmar or Burma, and it was a contemporary of the Angkor Empire, yet they practiced Hinayana Buddhism, and they were Buddhist as opposed to Hindus. So we can see that the influence of Indian religions expanded and spread far beyond the borders of India. Interesting thing, one of the largest Buddhist temples ever built was actually built in what is today Indonesia on the island of Java, and it was built about 900 AD, and they were Mahayana Buddhists in Java. And so one of the largest Buddhist temples ever built was actually built outside of India in Java. Now, when one looks at the history of India, what one finds is a history of empires that come and go. And one of the first of these empires to unite much of what is today India, and it also included the modern nation of Pakistan as well, was the Mauryan Empire. It was really founded around 300 or so BCE, and it flourished for several centuries. And one of the achievements of this empire was the publication of a very profound book that had great influence in India and across Southeast Asia, and that was the Arthasastra by a Brahmin priest named Kautilya. He was an advisor to the founder of the Mauryan Empire, and the Arthasastra is basically a manual about how to rule an empire. And this manual, written in Sanskrit, became a book that was followed by all the empires that followed, not just in India, but in Southeast Asia as well. And what Kautilya really stressed was that an empire needed to have a single strong ruler who had the backing of a strong military and a centralized, loyal bureaucracy. And Kautilya believed that human beings are prone to sin and to evil acts, and that the only way to maintain order and peace and the blessings of the gods was through a strong government that ruled with an iron fist to keep the peace and to keep the worst instincts of humans under wraps. So this became kind of a guiding principle for many of the rulers over the centuries that ruled over Indian empires. Another great Indian empire was the empire of the Gupta Empire. This flourished around 400 AD. The period of the Gupta Empire was one of a great period of intellectual and artistic achievement. Some of the great temples of India were built under the Gupta Empire. And the Gupta Empire can lay claim to be one of the first places to have what we would call a university, a place where scholars congregated, where students came to learn various subjects from medicine to mathematics to philosophy. Another important achievement of the Gupta Empire was the development of Hindu numerals, like the numerals that we use around the world, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We know them as Arabic numerals because they were transmitted to Europe via the Arabs, but they were originally invented in India, in Gupta Empire, under the Gupta Empire, along with algebra. So many of the great achievements of European scientists and mathematicians would not have been possible without the great inventions of the great scholars of the Gupta Empire. One of the very important moments in the history of India was when Islam came to India. The Islam really came to control large portions of India, beginning with the Ghaznavid Empire. The Ghaznavid Empire was founded by Turks from Central Asia. A man by the name of Sepuktajan, who was a Turkish warlord. He conquered an empire that extended from eastern Iran through what is today Pakistan all the way into northern India. And he was the Sultan, the Sultan being a Turkish name for a ruler, means authority or power or ruler. And he established a system when the Turks were Muslims, when they conquered lands in India. What they found themselves in a situation was that they ruled over millions of people who were non-Muslims. And following practices they'd used elsewhere, they established a system where all non-Muslims had to pay the jizra, or a poll tax. And we've talked about this on the lecture on Islam. And this poll tax was quite heavy. Also, Hindus were forbidden to repair or rebuild any of their temples. So they were free to practice their ancient religion, but they had to pay a heavy tax and could not repair their own temples. But if they converted to Islam, then all that went away, the poll tax went away, and they had full equality with all Muslims in the empire. Now, the Ghaznavid Empire lasted for nearly 2 centuries, but it was replaced after 1206 by a new wave of Turkish invaders who were also Muslims, who established a new line of sultans with the city of Delhi in northern India as its capital. And as you can see from the map on the bottom, the Delhi Sultanate at its heyday in around the year 1400 or so came to rule over much of India. And they followed the same practice as Muslims as the Ghaznavid Empire, where they imposed a heavy poll tax and did not allow Hindus to build temples, new temples, or even repair old ones. But any Hindu who converted to Islam had full equality with other Muslims. As a result of this Islamic conquest and occupation, over the centuries, millions of Hindus converted to Islam. And since Islam ruled over parts of northern India for much longer periods of time than in central or southern India, the number of Muslims remained concentrated in northern parts of the Indian subcontinent. That's why Pakistan is predominantly a Muslim country to this day. whereas you do not find as many Muslims. There's still some 200 million strong in India today, but not as numerous as or as concentrated as they are in Pakistan. Now, the Turks were not only active in India, bringing Islam to India, but Turks were also on the move. There are people of the Eurasian steppe who were also on the move into Western Asia, and from Iran through what is today Syria and Palestine and Israel. The Seljuk Turks were a group of Turks ruled by the Seljuk dynasty of sultans, and around after 1000 AD they advanced westward, and around 1071 these Turks went to battle against the ancient Byzantine Empire. From an earlier lecture, you know, that Byzantine Empire went all the way back to the days of ancient Rome. But at the Battle of Manzikert, the Turks won a great victory, and the Byzantine Empire shrunk, and much of Anatolia now became occupied and ruled by Turks, and that part of the world is now the nation of Turkey from the Turks. Now, about the Seljuk dynasty broke up into a number of different states by the 13th century, and eventually in 1299 in northeastern Anatolia, a man by the name of Osman I carved out a principality in northeastern Anatolia and began to expand his holdings by attacking the Byzantine Empire, what was left of it, and also Orthodox Christian peoples who lived in what is today the Balkans, southeastern Europe. And they followed the same practice as the Turks in India, where when they conquered Christians, Christians were allowed to practice their faith, but they had to pay a poll tax and could not build new churches, following just the same principles as they followed in India. And this Byzantine Empire would go on to become by the 1500 would emerge as the dominant power in Western Asia, ruling over much of what we call the Middle East and Turkey, or Anatolia. And in 1453, they brought an end, kind of the nail in the coffin of the Byzantine Empire, by capturing Constantinople. So at the beginning of the modern era, around 1500, the great power in Southeast Europe and in Western Asia was the Ottoman Empire, named after Osman, who founded the Ottoman dynasty of sultans. So now we're going to move on, and we are going to talk about Africa. All right, we have already discussed Africa to a certain extent when we discussed the spread of Islam. And what we see happening in Africa is that we see the emergence of great civilizations, the Swahili city-states along the east coast of Africa. You can see the map here. What happened is that Arabs and Persians from the Middle East were interested in gold and ivory and slaves, and so they began to establish trading outposts along the coast of East Africa, at places like Mogadishu, which is currently in Somalia, or Kilwa in modern Tanzania. And so they established these trading posts that quickly became very flourishing city-states ruled by sultans. They adopted the title sultan. And Swahili is a mixture. It's the people who lived the indigenous peoples who lived in these areas spoke various languages, African indigenous languages, and Swahili is a mixture of African languages such as Bantu with Arabic and Persian. So a distinct culture and language developed in these independent city-states along the east coast of Africa. And they were fully involved in trade that stretched to India all the way to China. And they these merchants would go into the interior of Africa in search of gold and ivory and hides from animals, and they would then trade these to merchants from all over the Indian Ocean. And one of the areas that they traded with was one of the great states of the interior of Africa, the Kingdom of Zimbabwe, which gave its name to the current nation of Zimbabwe in South Africa. And this was a great state. You can see some of the ruins there of the great city and palace of the kings of Zimbabwe in South Africa. Another area where we see the development of great empires was in West Africa. Between the north coast, where you see the development of Islamic states in the Middle Ages, between the north coast of Africa and these emerging states in West Africa, you have the mighty Sahara Desert. And now the Sahara Desert had always posed a tremendous obstacle to trade, but when the Arabs came into West Africa, when they began to expand, they brought their camels with them. And what happened is that the introduction of the camel made it possible for, because the camels can go without water for long distances. They're great beasts of burden. So with camels, you could cross the desert. And so Arab traders began to cross the Sahara Desert, make contact with the African peoples in the interior. Often they were interested in gold and ivory and slaves and salt. And as a result of this interaction and this trade, many of the peoples in the interior, this area is known as the Sahel, it's its modern name, but the peoples in these areas converted to Islam. And what we see is the development of a series of great multi-ethnic empires that what they all had in common was that they were all Muslim, and they studied Arabic, of course, because you had to be a Muslim, you had to read Arabic, to read the Quran. So you see this series of great empires. The Ghana Empire, you can see on the map, was about 900. A little later, you had the Empire of Mali that gave its name to one of the African states of this region. And then around 1450, it was replaced by Songhai. So you see a series of empires. And in the case of all these empires, the rulers taxed the trade. They came, they trade in gold and salt and slaves. They taxed the trade and then used the proceeds from that trade to fund their armies and to maintain control over these vast empires that covered such great distances. One of the problems that Africans faced was that it's such a large region, and the rivers of Africa do not flow continually over the course of the year. During the dry season, they shrink in size. So there's not an easy way to move goods or to travel. And so maintaining an empire was always quite a challenge, but they found a way. So now we're going to move from Africa to what's going on in the Americas. So we're going to begin with North America, what is today the United States and Canada. And now there were a host of cultures that developed, Native American cultures that developed, there's been Native Americans for at least 15,000 years, or probably longer than that, in the Americas. But one of the great achievements of Native Americans was these series of what we call mound builder cultures that flourished primarily in the Mississippi and Ohio valleys, Mississippi River and the Ohio River valleys. And what marks these civilizations is the construction of these massive earthen mounds. Some historians refer to these peoples as mound builders, and these mounds were huge, hundreds of yards. I mean, just massive structures. Sometimes they're in the shape of animals, sometimes they're the shape of geometrical, like squares. Or when you get to the Mississippian culture that flourished between 800 and 1600, these mounds took the shape of giant pyramids. And these mounds served as burial places. They served as places where temples were erected, or where the houses of chieftains were located. One of the largest cities, and was its modern name is Cahokia. It's located just across from St. Louis, Missouri. It's in Illinois, what is now the modern state of Illinois. And this city was huge. It may have had a population as high as 40,000. And the Great Mound, one of the largest mounds, pyramids, that was built at Cahokia, was the largest man-made structure in the United States until the 19th century. It was like 400 feet tall. So you have these massive, great structures being built, and these structures would have involved a lot of elite leaders. You needed to have leaders, you needed to have organizers, architects. So these were very complex societies. Now moving south into Mexico and into Central America, we have a series of fantastic empires. One of the earliest were the Olmecs. Now they had a writing system, but it has not yet been deciphered, so we really don't know that much about the Olmecs, except that they built great cities with these giant pyramids of stone about 900 BCE. Now what we see in this part of the world is that when one civilization died out, its successors built on the foundation of that earlier civilization. So on the ruins of the Olmecs emerged a new civilization, the Mayan civilization, that was based in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico and also in countries such as Belize and Guatemala in Central America. And the Mayans, we do have their writing system. They had a writing system that has been translated in the last 50 years or so. And we know from their system of writing that the Mayans were divided into a number of independent kingdoms that were basically city-states. And over the centuries, some Mayan city-states emerged as more powerful than others. And so power shifted from one city-state to another. And it's pretty amazing. This recent archaeology has proven that the Mayans built in what is today jungle. They built massive cities supported by irrigation and canals and reservoirs, and they built causeways to connect their cities and built these massive stone temples. They were a great power, and there are actually still Mayans today. They still exist as a culture, but their great days of empire, for whatever reason, we don't really know, their cities began to decline probably around 900, but they still continued to build some fabulous cities even after 900, just not at the same level. Now, one of the more impressive empires in all of the Western Hemisphere was the empire of the Aztecs. Now, the Aztecs were Mixteca, or they're basically the ancestors of Mexican people today, and they built a great empire, based at their major city, which was located directly under what is today Mexico City, the capital of Mexico. And they were heirs to the traditions of earlier civilizations. They built massive pyramids, and their empire stretched and covered much of what is today central Mexico. And they were one of the great powers all the way up into the arrival of Europeans. When the Spanish arrived in their capital of Tenochtitlan, they were just amazed by the size and wealth and the great riches of this ancient city, which they then destroyed. Now, when we move on to South America, one of the greatest empires of all the Americas was the mighty Inca Empire. And the Inca Empire was based in the Andes. The Andes are a chain of mountains that run from north to south. They're actually an extension of the Rocky Mountains all the way up in the United States. These mountains run all the way down the spine of North and South America. Now the Andes, between the Andes and the Pacific Ocean, you have an area where you have these river valleys that are formed when the snow melts in the Andes and the rivers flow into the Pacific Ocean. And so these river valleys were places where you could grow crops and raise large families because of large populations, because of the abundant soil, because of these river valleys. And so there are actually civilizations that go all the way back to at least 2500 BC. At a site of Corral in what is today Peru, they found a massive city that with giant pyramids, an amazing. These pyramids are the same date as the mighty pyramids of Egypt, but But what we see happening in the centuries after Corral was that there are a whole host of great civilizations that developed in the Andes Mountains and in this coastal region where you have these very fertile river valleys. And sometime around 1300 or so, the Inca were from, you can see Lake Titicaca on the in the Andes Mountains. They were from the Andes Mountains, but the Inca they were great warriors, and they were able to unite all of this territory, all of what is today Peru, much of what is today Ecuador, all the way down much of what is today Chile. It was a huge empire with millions and millions of peoples in it, and they built roads to connect their empire. They built great fortresses and great palaces of stone, and it was a massive empire. And they believed that their rulers were gods, and they revered them. And this Inca Empire, just like the Aztec Empire, would fall victim to the arrival of Spanish conquistadors, which you will learn about in your modern world history class. So that brings it to an end of our very quick examination of world history before 1500.